Welcome, everybody, to Motherhood Rawful But True, with me, your host, Rainbow Goddess. This podcast offers candid portrayals of the reality of mothering in a Western, individualistic, patriarchal culture. Another episode of Motherhood Rawful But True with me, your host, Rainbow Goddess. And today I've got a very special guest, Andrea Clarke of root.medicine. And I met Andrea on a facilitator retreat that we did in Glastonbury at Earth Spirit a couple of months ago. And we were all connected to Alexi through universal movement, one way or another. And she brought us all together, didn't she? And we all offered our work to each other. And your workshop, the womb wrapping workshop, was very profound for me. I'll just quickly tell the listeners that for 5 years I'd been wanting to deal deeply with this birth trauma, and I thought I wanted a closing of the bones. And I thought I understood that because I'd done doula training and I'd been working with the principles of it without appropriating the cultural sacred belief systems. I'd appreciated the sentiment of it and I'd reworked it in my work. And I work a lot with the grandmothers and the net of light. So I'd bring it in as this like swaddling. And I didn't just do it for women, I'd do it with men and in group rituals and workshops, retreats, etc. And it was a mending thing, a beautiful mending thing. And then I started these day retreats for mothers, for mending mattress sense, and applied it more for the wounding of mattress sense for women at the end. So we'd wrap each other and rock each other and sing over each other. But when I came to your womb wrapping workshop at this retreat, you articulated it in a way that completely flipped my understanding of what it was. Instead of it being something that was passive and receptive, you gave me this framework of it being something that is a tool that I would use for myself, as something to heal myself, as something to empower myself. And you framed it as soul retrieval. And I understand soul retrieval through shamanic journeying and parts work and integration. You know, there's all these different ways of seeing it, but you speaking to this womb space and this womb wrapping as being a space to do this, it was so game changing for me, and I went for it, and I did that 5 years, what I'd been wanting to do for 5 years, and I reclaimed the parts of myself that were trapped in that hospital in a state of terror and rage, and it was incredibly profound, you know, and the depth of the container that you opened. I mean, I say this to you, but I'll say it to the listeners. You are a container. Like, you are a container. You don't open space and hold space. You are the space. And I've never really experienced that before. You know, and I've been in a lot of really safe spaces with very well experienced holders who come from a space of deep integrity and deep heart. But yeah, I really felt held in the blossom of your womb temple. And the way you were articulating things, it was so grounded and so accessible. And you had women of every different stage of the spectrum of relationships with the wombs. And you held it so well. You made each one feel so comfortable in their own right to be in their own process. And it was a very big initiation for me. And then recently I had an opportunity to do what I was going to do as a closing ceremony, like a women's circle to sit together and hold each other. And I was able then, because I'd experienced it, to integrate these teachings and provide a space for 6 women to journey really deeply in a very safe way. So I'm just so grateful for what I received from your transmission and having this activation in me, because we all carry this medicine of being able to open our wombs, to be a bloom, to hold the space. And it's just about empowering the other women to just feel. It's so simple. and to call it back. It's just such an incredible tool. And your website also speaks to how it's needed for us to do this at this time, because we have to step up, because the world needs us to be sovereign and to be able to do this. So that was quite a big story before I've even let you even say hi. But I just really wanted to give that context first so the listeners can feel the depth of you and the richness of you before they even hear your voice. So,
Mm.
ladies and maybe gentlemen, if men listen to this, welcome Andrea Clarke of Root Medicine. It's such an honour and a privilege to have you on. Thank you.
Mm. Thank you. It's a real honor, and I really appreciate. It's so beautiful you when you work with women and they they get to experience the work, but they also get to experience things and the meaning of things in a very different way, and it lands completely differently. And then you're able to use it yourself in a very, very different way. And I think that whole, I really appreciate what you're saying about I am the container. That's a really beautiful thing for me to hear. And it is a culmination of my journey to be able to hold that space. And I think, particularly over the last couple of years, each time I have held that type of space, and it's often in spaces that are much more grounded, so they're much earthier. That's when I've either been on gatherings in yurts or Little Earth. Yeah, those spaces, because they're closer to the ground, to the earth, just feel as though the potential is that much greater than if it's kind of in a building on a first floor or a second floor, being kind of like almost kind of like being in a deeper resonance and connection with the womb of Mother Earth. And as my as my understanding grows, actually it's now feeling kind of quite emotional.
Mm.
I am feeling quite emotional because why am I feeling so
Mm.
emotional? I can feel it all in my voice. It's all kind of like wavery. It's kind of like it means so much to be met and received by somebody who has already done so much work and is doing the work, but can also feel the difference. Because there's a lot of talk about space holding and space holders, and it's a bit of a buzz thing, isn't it? I'm a space holder, but what does that actually mean? What it means to me now is different even from a year ago, 2 years ago. So really kind of, I suppose one of the biggest differences for me is really kind of calling in all of the allies. So working within the middle of the medicine circle and calling in the elements and calling in the ancestors and the guides and any other high being that wants to be part of that process. And so it's not just me holding that space. It is all of those allies with me and through me that is holding that space. And I think that is where we get the depth. That's where we get the deep holding, because it isn't just me. And I think the more I do work for myself, the clearer the channel I am. And that just means the capacity I have to hold that space is just enhanced. It's not kind of, I don't think about it. I'm not trying to do it. I'm not forcing it. It's just how it is. It's just how it's unfolding for me. And I think that's kind of why I'm feeling quite emotional, because to have that reflected back to me it means everything. It absolutely means everything to me. So I'm truly, truly grateful for the words that you've shared, and what you received from it. It means everything.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, there you go, listeners. This is our beautiful Andrea. So, this podcast is Motherhood Rawful But True. And as the listeners know, this is about, you know, speaking to the reality of mothering in a Western, individualistic, patriarchal culture. And if we, I love talking about your work and swimming in it, but I want to know about your journey through mattress sense. And yeah, if you could go into that for us and share some of that with us. And then after that, what I'd love to do is go into this arc of reflecting on how you've applied your womb wisdom to your mattress sense and how that supported you. And yeah, it'd be lovely to get to that. But first, let's hear about your journey into mattress sense.
Mm. Mm. So, gosh, how much to share? For a
Motherhood
fuller
Rawful
story,
But
you can go to my
True. We want the
website. I don't know
Rawful
how much I'll
bits,
be actually.
obviously. Come on.
Okay. So, my journey into mattress sense. So let me just kind of lay the kind of framework, because my my motherhood journey wasn't the smoothest journey, for sure. So I was a single parent for 7 years. Um, I really, I really and truly believe that my daughter coming into my life at 33 was truly my wake up call. She she came to me and really single-handedly took me out of the funk from where I was. So I'd spent most of my 20s with as a functioning heroin addict. I'd At that time I was in a relationship with a very unserving person. I would, reflecting on it back now, I didn't think so at the time, because that kind of terminology wasn't really available of being with a narcissist, but I fully appreciate that's kind of the person that he was. And at the time I was working in retail fashion. So I was working in stores in Sloane Street, South Marlton Street, Kings Road. I started off in sales. I moved into as assistant. I was a manager of a store. And that was kind of all swimming along. I was living in squats at the time and moved from a squat. We bought a house, or we bought a flat in Kentish Town. So definitely on the functioning side of that spectrum. Had a big wake up call at 28, 29, was on holiday in Turkey, experienced rape and the aftermath of that, of not being validated in that
So sorry.
experience. So had a big
So
wake up
sorry about
call
that.
then. Decided to leave. Decided to leave London, leave my job, leave that kind of framework, and then managed to wasn't quite ready with London at that point, so managed to find my way back in again, and then went promptly back into kind of the club culture and all the kind of narcotics that were available in that kind of culture and that kind of scenario. And again, was kind of functioning with it. And then found myself pregnant at 33. And I knew it immediately. I mean, I'd had a termination at 21, just before my finals at university. And that definitely felt the right decision then at 21. and with that particular partner, who was the one through my 20s. And then when I found myself pregnant at 33, even though I wasn't in a stable relationship at all, there was never for a moment was there a question about what I was going to do. Like, from as soon as I saw that test result, I was kind of like, that's it. That is where we are. That's what's going to happen. And I remember having a conversation with a guy that I had a few sessions with him. He was a kind of psychological astrologer, and I remember having a conversation with him and kind of discussing whether it would be a good thing to kind of go home and go back to Leicester, where I'm from, and to be with my family in my pregnancy. And he was kind of like, absolutely, absolutely, that's what you need to do. And so that's what I chose to do. So I left London a second time. And, you know, when I look back on my neediness in terms of relationship and desperately trying to get her father to be part of that relationship, and even just the process of trying to get him to come up to put his name on her birth certificate, and in the end him not being able to do that, and so his name is still not, it was never on her birth certificate. And then navigating that space. So initially I was with my parents, and they became her kind of surrogate father figure, so my mum and my dad. So I lived with them for about a year, and then I went into a rented property. And highs and lows of being a single parent, for sure. But it felt absolutely the right thing to do. I think so. I began my journey into kind of alternative therapies, really, beginning with the astrology. So I was kind of really interested in that. So initially I thought, after I'd had her, that I was going to train in astrology, and then that kind of like died off a little bit. And then I kind of did like a little workshop in crystals and one with reflexology. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I think I might be quite good at this, actually. This kind of feels like really comfortable. I feel like I've done this before. And so I kind of, I mean, she was a really good baby, I have to say, and she carried on kind of sleeping through the day for years and years. So while she was doing that, that's when I kind of like did all my essays and my kind of all my other bits and pieces that I needed to do for my training, because I then decided to train as a reflexologist. And then I decided to train in complementary therapies, and it felt quite simple. I found out actually that whilst I was pregnant and I was no longer going out in London, I was actually able to save some money, so that when I came home, I got kind of like a nice little nest egg for like 29 years ago. I think it was about £5,000 or £6,000. And so I chose to use that money really, really mindfully. So I chose to use that for this period, which I kind of look back on, was that this period of healing of past relationships. I felt absolutely so strongly that I did not want to attract the same kind of person that I'd attracted in the past. And so those 7 years of not being in relationship, like I seemed to be like deeply unattractive to the other sex. Like nobody, for those 7 years, there was a part of me like, these are the best years of my life and nobody's even looking at me, which was brilliant, because I think doing work on yourself is kind of quite difficult when you're in relationships sometimes, particularly when your issues are around emotions and relationship. And so not being with anybody for those years was just allowed me the space to do the work that I needed to do. And then just before my daughter turned 7, I started a relationship who's the person I'm with now. And I decided to do an energy field healing training. And literally from the get-go, we'd been in relationship for a couple of weeks, and the first weekend that I needed to be away, so it was only in Birmingham, so it was just during the day, he kind of stepped in and he mothered and fathered my daughter from the very beginning. And that was kind of like the next level of foundation of that mothering journey. I remember on the first Father's Day we were together, and he bought me a gift. And he was like, well, you've been a father to her as well. So I just thought it was like
Oh,
really appropriate to buy you a Father's Day
that
gift.
is so
I know,
sweet. My gosh.
I know, I know.
So can
Beautiful.
we just break here? There's a
So
few things that I just want to
that was,
touch on.
mm,
Yeah, like
mm,
these 7 years. So the first year of being a mum, you was with your mum and dad. You'd left London. So that must have
mm.
been a bit mad,
Yeah,
becoming responsible.
raging, raging.
And
It was the kind of, it felt the being forced to leave somewhere where I absolutely loved, but equally knowing that that would not have been possible to be a single parent in London without a good
mm,
foundation and base. So, absolutely knowing in my heart that was the right decision, but equally finding that really difficult. The change. I would say the one thing that saved me was I was able to buy a car. It was a shitty little car. It was a little Citroen that was just felt like it was super dangerous to be driving around it because the wheels were so thin. But it saved me. I honestly, that little red
mm,
car saved my mental health
yeah.
because it gave me autonomy. Um, but it was difficult. I hadn't lived with my parents for years. They did things in a very, very different way. you know I'd chosen very consciously to live a very different life from them, and so to come kind of back into it at 33, 34 was just kind of like I had to suck up a lot, but equally
Mm,
knowing that was the right thing to do. So then being able to move into my own place with her was just kind of like, okay, equally scary, but equally, yes, this is the right thing to do. Like, she's a year old now, and yeah, we shared some beautiful times together. She has some really beautiful memories. We used to go on holiday down into this area where I've now moved to, which is I'm in the South Hams at the moment, but we used to come down to Salcombe and down to Foy, and so she has beautiful memories of holidays with my parents. They're so important to her. They are her kind of like foundational pieces that
mm,
she looks back really
beautiful. Yeah,
fondly
there's a lot
with.
of research about how integral it is to have good relationships with grandparents. Yeah, yeah, really beautiful. And I just,
Particularly if you're on your own, it's for me it was really important. I mean, I still had kind of like at that point, because of the lifestyle that I'd led, I still had kind of issues with my siblings in kind of like they didn't understand my lifestyle, and I think they felt I kind of been granted extra to what they had because I'd kind of moved back. I don't actually feel it was like that, and I think there was, we're in a much different place, and like nearly 30 years on there, we've kind of come full circle with that, so that's no longer an issue. But I think they kind of had issue with that and around that for a long time. But just having my mum and dad there for my daughter was,
mm,
yeah, it was beautiful. And I
yeah,
got to see a different side of them
yeah,
as well,
and
which was
nice.
lovely.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to as well, like there's a lot of stigma out there about single mums. Single mums get a lot of flack
Mm-hmm.
and they're really misrepresented. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what single mums
Mm-hmm.
actually are. And I love how you're speaking to the reality. You know, a lot of single mums aren't what the stigma says. You know, the stigma paints them as these dregs of society that are emotional wrecks, that are very needy,
Mm-hmm.
that need all this government support, can't stand on their own 2 feet. But the reality is, single mothers are the silent heroines of our time, and they do so much work, as your partner's acknowledged. You know, you're playing the role of two parents and a village. You know, some people aren't lucky enough to have
Mm-hmm.
this more intergenerational. It's very much nuclear, single, and
Yeah.
separated from the
Yeah.
roots and the grandparents, isn't it? Like my
Mm-hmm.
son's a bit estranged from my mum and dad because of the distance. You know, we only see him once a month-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's hard. But yeah, so with the research I did on single spiritual but not religious mothers, what you find is that this propensity, and it's evidenced in how you use that money. So you didn't go for materialism. You didn't go for beauty products that would boost your self-esteem and mask your trauma. You use that money to heal and empower yourself. And so the capacity it takes to do that when you're a single parent doing the work of the village, and you're also then looking to do work, deep inner personal development work, you know, that takes up a lot of space, needs a lot of integration time. And so some people, you know, they're quite privileged, they'll go on these therapeutic journeys, they've got a family holding the space, they can really just be in it and process and rest. But when single mums go on this
Mm-hmm.
journey of healing trauma, they're holding everything up and themselves. There's often nobody else mothering or nurturing that
Mm-hmm.
mother. And she's also doing all the domestic labour. She's also shouldering all of the financial burden. You know, only 50% of single mums actually get maintenance from the fathers. So there's a half of them basically are
Mm-hmm.
financially doing it on their own as well.
Yeah, I mean, I never got any maintenance. I would regularly get a letter every year that said her father's name, and in this period you have received not naught point naught naught, and you will be receiving not naught point naught naught. It was like every year, and I just thought, are you taking the piss? Like, I know what I've received and what I haven't
Yeah,
received.
it's shit. It's really, really shit. It's a piss poor do. A piss poor do.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes.
And so
Mm.
instead of the narrative being, you
I
know,
mean,
instead of the
as it
narrative
turns out,
being, look at the state of this society that is putting so much on these women and look at what they're achieving under all of that. They are fucking glorious. The strength of them, the capacity of them to do all of this and raise conscious, empathetic sons and empowered daughters at the same time. You know, it's just such a flip. The reality of what's going on, it's such a flip to the narrative that's out there. So I wanted to really celebrate you for doing that. Mm,
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 thank you. I mean, the I suppose the flip side of that, the flip side of being the mother and the father, is that masculine feminine balance within, and for the mother, and that over time for me started to feel distorted, because having to hold all that and be the father and be the mother isn't necessarily particularly helpful or healthy in terms of our feminine energy. So we become very independent. I mean, I was independent anyway, but yeah, that kind of masculine feminine balance can become distorted through that. and we become hyper independent, and we become a little bit removed, and we find it quite difficult to ask for help and ask for support just to kind of help balance things out. Or we might find it kind of really difficult to receive. So people might be offering stuff, but we might not feel worthy enough to be able to receive. And so that kind of, and so we say no, 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 it's okay, no, it's okay, I've got it, no, it's okay, thank you, but no, I'm okay, I can manage. That's kind of like another level, the next level of healing in that, when we can actually, as mothers, whether we're actually as mothers, whether we're in relationship or not, is being able to receive, just being able to receive for ourselves, or be able to receive for ourselves and our children. That's kind of like the next level, isn't it?
It's letting the village in as
You know,
well, isn't it? Like
and the
I've had to do
worthiness of
that,
that
the
being,
practice of letting the village in, like a longing and grieving for the village. But unless I say
yeah,
yes to these little moments, these little pockets, I'm not letting it in. So I'm at this point now with my own
yeah,
journey, this thing around belonging, like it's not something that comes and happens. I co-create belonging. I reach out the tendrils. I have to create opportunities to connect, and then I have to allow them people in, either through by being vulnerable and speaking my truth, or by like what you're
mm,
saying, receiving the love, receiving the help, receiving the support, saying, yes, thank you, instead of, no, I'm all right. Yes, thank you.
mm,
Yeah. And I see it with the women, who come to the village group and they're taking the shoes off with the baby still in their arm. And, rather than, because we are so habituated as well to doing things on our own. Like a lot of women, even in nuclear families, spend up to 8 hours a day on their own with a baby.
mm,
So when they go into these groups for an hour every week, they're so ingrained into doing everything with the right hand while they've still got the bit like, so they won't even let someone hold the baby while they take the shoes off, or sit down on a beanbag, or get up from the beanbag to doing it and the baby's
yeah,
heads are wobbling around. But even little simple moments like that, yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It's a beautiful
mm,
work and a healing
yeah,
work. Yeah. Mm.
mm,
And then the other bit was I wanted to celebrate out, with finding the money in a monetized society, which is increasingly expensive, and demands more and more bits of money, subscriptions, blah, de, blah, de, blah. As a single mom that's trying to do
mm-hmm,
some sacred livelihood, not just a 9 to 5, and still
mm-hmm,
be able to take the child on holiday and make nice memories. That's another layer as well, isn't it? So just really wanting to celebrate that, and wondering if you can speak to, your transition from working in the mainstream to birthing your sacred livelihood, and now this being a self-employed, but not just self-employed,
mm-hmm,
you're serving the healing, aren't you, of
yeah,
humanity. So how did we go from being a mother who was
yeah,
doing this personal development work and these trainings, healing herself with a 7-year-old, then, getting this really supportive guy, flip into being this medicine woman that's now serving through sacred livelihood?
yeah. Well, so I started doing those trainings, and um, I started teaching. I started teaching in further education. So I did my teacher training courses and exams, and then I went straight from that into teaching that in further education and doing some treatments from home. So that kind of made that transition a little bit easier, but I still wanted to be doing my personal work, and the trainings that I did were kind of pretty constant. So during that kind of phase, if I didn't have enough money, because I was like, obviously that little nest egg was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and I kind of didn't want, I needed something. Always needed some kind of cushion. So I would, I would eat less, or I wouldn't buy anything for, personally, for like weeks at a time, because I just made those choices about where I wanted to spend that money at that time. In terms of with my partner, he's not, after all this time, he's still not kind of, if you asked him what I did, he'd kind of like, I don't really know, I don't really understand, don't really understand any of that. I don't really understand. And yet he has always given me space to do whatever I needed to do. He's never questioned anything. He's never said to me, I don't think that's a good idea, or I don't want you to do that, or I don't want you to be away, or whatever. He's never done that. So he has always been that kind of like really grounded, earthy kind of presence, which has been really beautiful. I mean, I know on another level, he knows exactly what he's doing. And I think kind of he does know what he's doing on the conscious level as well, but kind of like pretends he doesn't really know. But he is that container that allows me to do what I need to do with never any judgment. I suppose the biggest flip for me was when I did the abdominal sacral massage training, and then on the back of that the fertility massage training. That was the biggest piece. I'd kind of already done reproductive reflexology, so I was already working with fertility, and kind of like understood very well, and from the body work that I was doing, how that impacts on things like menstrual cycle, but with the reproductive reflexology, how we can actually really impact on menstrual cycle issues and pain and fertility through working with the feet. But the real eye opener was when I did that womb massage training, because it just opened up a whole new world to me. So I was using that for quite a few years, and then I
Sorry, I just want,
then I started training
sorry,
with Tammy
Andrea,
Kent. So I don't
sorry.
know whether
While
your
you were just
listeners
speaking
know her,
about that,
but
I'd just really love
yeah,
to know more about it. When you did the womb massage, what was
yeah,
it that opened up?
yeah.
Was it before then that you'd done a lot of body stuff and reflexology, but not gone to the womb and understood it as this like multi-dimensional
Yes.
thing?
I mean, I didn't even understand it as that then. I mean, this is kind of like I did that training back in 2013. Um, and so then I was just kind of like touching the surface of what the energy of this womb space is. I don't think we particularly went into it as kind of like a multi-dimensional portal or anything back then. I don't think that was kind of really, really the understanding. So that, I mean, for me on a personal level, I'd always had menstrual pain. So like when I was at school, I used to faint from the pain. So not for days at a time, but for 2 or 3 days, mainly just like 1 or 2 days,
Oh my
I would have a lot of
gosh.
menstrual pain. And I did like a 1 day workshop with somebody who did our Vigo, and we connected with our womb space. We did some light massage, we did some yoni steaming, and within a month, that menstrual
Wow.
pain ceased. So pretty much from that point onwards to when I went into perimenopause and menopause, I literally had a handful of bleeds that were a little bit
Wow.
painful. So that just suggested to me, even before I did that full training, this is really powerful stuff. Like if you can alter a pain pattern that has been going on for like 20 odd years, I think I started my period at 11, 20, 30 years, if you can change it that rapidly, this is really important. And the only thing that has changed is that I've started to open up to a conversation, or it wasn't even a conversation, it was just through touch at that point. And the massage we did was just really, really light. It was through the clothing. It was just kind of literally making that initial connection. So that it wasn't kind of like I wasn't communing with my womb space at that point. I wasn't connecting other than just through touch and just bringing that into my awareness. So that kind, I worked like that for 3 or 4 years, and then I did the training with Tammy. So Tammy wrote a book as response to 9/11. She's a female physio in the States in Oregon, and she wrote a book called Wild Feminine. And I'd had it on my bookcase for a few years, one of those ones, and I'd kind of like I bought it because everybody else had bought it, but I didn't pick it up, one of those ones. And then I did the training with her, and I was like, oh my God, we've got ovaries as well. These ovaries are like, these are really important. These little creative spots in our body, and they how they relate to the masculine and feminine energy. I was like, oh my God, how remiss of me to kind of leave these ovaries out of this. I'd just been working solely with the womb space, and then I had awareness of the ovaries, and then I had awareness of the vagina itself and the cervix. So it's just kind of like blossomed. It's literally kind of blossomed layer by layer by layer because I've chosen it. I chose to kind of like follow those pathways. I've chose to follow those callings and just allowed myself to kind of meander through things. It always fascinates me when people are like, with business, and they're like, what's your 5-year plan and your 10-year plan? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never known what that is because I don't know what fully, even now, I've got much more of an inkling now of what spirit needs me to do, where spirit needs me to be, where I need to be to fulfill my own soul purpose. So how can I write like, what do I want to be doing in 5 years? I've got no idea. I don't know. And I think if you become too rigid in where you're going, then you miss maybe the little nudges and the kind of, it's this pathway, it's down here. It's down here. So I just kind of like kept myself open to just experiencing different things. But I would say the work with Tammy, that blew things open to the next level. And each time I do something like that, then it was the feminine embodiment, and that kind of brought me kind of from being this practitioner who was trying to sort people and kind of be responsible for healing people and make them better. That idea of being a coach and just holding the space was like, wow, this feels so much more empowered. Like I'm facilitating, I'm no longer doing it. I'm just facilitating, and I can be quite challenging in a therapy space, because if I see somebody avoiding or digressing or whatever it is, I call it out because that's my job. Hopefully I do that in an empathetic way. But if it needs to be in a powerful, strong way, then that's what I do. I get stuff coming through, and I'm like, in the past, I was like, I can't say that to somebody. That's like, oh, no, I can't say that. And it would just get repeated in my head over and over again until I said it. And I'd be like, I don't know whether this kind of like resonates with you at all, but this is what I'm getting. And, 9.9 times out of 10, they'd be like, yeah, completely. So the more I trusted that, the more that came through, and the easier that became for me to verbalize. And also knowing, I know there's a big difference when I'm channeling stuff through for somebody, because it's like so wise, and I'm like, well, that's not me. But and it literally, it hits the mark and is exactly what they need to hear
Yeah.
at that
You
particular
mentioned
time.
this earlier, we're speaking to the hollow bone. This is like another shamanic concept of how we are this conduit for the divine wisdom, for source intelligence to move through. And the
Mm,
more we get ourselves, this personality that's lived
yeah,
in this life, out of the way, and in order to do that, we've got to move the debris, all the clunk that's attached on to that. So the healing is to do that, to clear the debris and the
Exactly.
persona that we
Exactly.
are in this life, so that we can get a sense of what we really are, which is
Hmm.
source, manifest as a human, having an experience, right? That wanting to
Mm.
serve, wanting to evolve, and wanting to learn. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've totally forgot my point now. I've gone off into this
But
like,
also, but also within that is the more we clear ourselves and the better channel we become, and the more work we do with our
mm,
ancestral lineage and clear those pathways
mm,
down the masculine and feminine lines, the more we're able to access those gifts, those ancestral gifts, but also who
mm,
we have been in the past. Like, when I first started doing that womb work, I was like, this is a coming home. I've done this before. I have done this before. This feels so comfortable. So comfortable. Like when I first did my massage training, everybody always, like, if they can get away with not massaging an abdomen, they will do. Unless somebody very specifically asks for that, you're like, ooh. Until I started to work on my own. And then it's kind of like, oh my, this is just the most beautiful, juicy place to work. Like you're massaging a belly. It doesn't matter what size it is. It doesn't matter what scars there are there. It doesn't matter. It's just showing that non-judgmental love for another woman's belly is just the most beautiful work you can do, because it's kind of like it just says to them this belly is lovable, and it's lovable exactly as it is. It doesn't
mm.
need to look a certain way, and we can become disconnect from our womb spaces and our pelvis for lots of different reasons, whether that's trauma, emotional trauma, sexual trauma, through pain, through disease, through conditions, and we just kind of like shut it off. And so, my work is to bring women back to that space and realize the power and the strength and what lies once we connect with that, how that actually then we can connect in
Mm,
with Great Mother. That's essentially, where I'm at currently. And even that, I mean, that is kind of like a relatively recent connection, connecting with the Great Mother source, actual source, that void space before the light.
mm.
There's dark,
Like
and
the
it's that
womb of
dark space,
creation.
and it's that
We
dark
call it
space that
great
we
grandmother
can.
cosmos. Source in our house.
Exactly.
Source is great grandmother cosmos.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. That's the kind of
yeah.
that's the work. That's the work.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear some snippets relating to mothers of how this womb wrapping and this abdominal work works specifically for them, because as you heard at the beginning,
Mm,
listeners, it helped me with my birth trauma to reclaim parts of myself that were still in that
mm,
space. But I can imagine with you what you're speaking to now, like the shame of the
mm.
body, like how the body changes after motherhood, and then, women having problems that arise from complicated pregnancies and, other things. I can imagine there's so many different ways that this can support. So if you wanted to speak to a couple of case studies, that would be nice.
Yeah. I think that womb wrapping, I think we kind of changed the terminology around that to kind of like I think we called it reclaiming the soul, but it is an aspect of soul retrieval. I think essentially, what happens when we experience a trauma is we can leave aspects of ourself back, aspects of our consciousness back in that trauma space. And sometimes energetically, we keep on looping back to that. So those people who kind of like just always kind of bring back to like, oh, it's this point, and they're literally on this loop and everything comes back to this point and they can't kind of break free. So we can kind of be doing it that way we could have maybe had to have had a leg amputated, and leave the energy of that leg back when that happened. And this can happen not just in this lifetime, but for me in past lifetimes, or lifetimes that are happening in a different dimensional space, however you choose to look at that. So there's that kind of aspect of that retrieval and bringing it back to rightful, lawful time, to the now moment. But also, just generally, we can fragment through time and space as we move through life. So just aspects just fragment off, or we can be spending a lot of time down the down the timeline in the future that we're constantly kind of dreaming of and thinking of where we want to be, rather than being in the present moment, and that fragments consciousness off as well. But there's we could be fragmented off emotionally, or it can be a very physical thing. Like for yourself, that was a very physical experience that you had. So that womb wrapping, you can use that. It is multidimensional. You can use that in many, many different ways. And that is dependent on maybe the intention that is set, because I think intention sets a container, and I think that's a masculine thing, holding a container, and then that feminine energy can move within that, knowing it's held safely, and it gives some kind of focus, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But when we are wrapped, it it has the potential to bring whatever is out there inward and back in. So it's kind of like a reintegration, and you could use that as in the closing of the bones, which I have trained in as well, on a very physical level, literally kind of like drawing the bones together. But also, I've experienced it many times when I've been working with them, and their birth field is still very open, like they're literally energy is leaking. And so that might be mothers who have birthed maybe a year, 2 years ago, maybe a longer, but they're not able to sustain their energy. Their energy is just like leaking away, and it literally feels like sometimes, I can stand at the bottom by their feet, and it's literally like it's just energy leaking out. And that could be from a traumatic experience in birth. So we're just kind of like, the wrap is like giving the energy, it's kind of indicating to the energy it's time to come home. It's time to come back into the space you're meant to be. It closes things down and draws things in physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I think how you experienced it, where rather than just me doing it to a client, where you were doing it for each other. And so there is a piece there about the receiving from a sister and the giving.
Mm.
And that is equally important, like holding that sacred space for another sister. And you can kind of like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing and I'm not really experienced. It
Mm.
kind of doesn't really matter, because it's all about your intention. And if your intention is just to hold that space for her and to lovingly give to her what she needs, that's enough. It's enough. You don't have to be Reiki trained or this. You don't have to be, because your heart is connecting with hers, your womb is connecting with hers, and you're just holding that space. And even if you're just kind of holding her feet, holding somebody's feet helps to ground them, helps them to be in the present. And that's another part of it. That's another part of that, bringing them back in and going, it's safe. Like in this moment, you are safe. I'm holding you, and I'll carry on holding
Mm.
you for as long as you need to be held. And that's really beautiful to be able to receive, and really beautiful to be able to receive from a sister. We're kind of full blown into all of the witch wound and the sister wound. And yeah, that is there because they are women who've experienced trauma. They are women living in a patriarchal society. But that is changing. And also, the more work we do on ourselves, the more we can kind of find our rightful tribe of women who are like, fuck that,
Mm,
I'm not going to do that anymore. I want to be there for my sisters who've experienced something similar, or I want to be there for my sisters there in the collective and be working not just because whenever we do work for
mm,
ourselves, we're not just doing it for ourselves. We really aren't. We're doing it for our ancestors. We're doing it for our daughters and our nieces and our
yeah,
granddaughters, and we're doing it for the collective.
yeah.
That's the beauty of it. We're doing it on a soul level. We might not know that or understand it, but that is the truth.
Mm. Could just listen to
It's
you
true though, isn't it?
all day, Mama. Yeah, I told you, didn't I, on that retreat? I'll tell the listeners, I said, you're my new role model. Yeah, so much respect for you and the depth and intricacy. The multi-layered. It's like is it a phyllo pastry? That flaky. There's so many layers, so many layers, so many layers. It's just this word that you use, delicious and juicy, because it is. It's this ripe, overflowing, abundant two-land resource and guide and
Mm.
crucible and healing tool. It's just, yeah, it's very, very special. So I'd love to know how in this relationship, because I know he seems quite a grounded guy and he lets you do
Mm.
your stuff. As you've evolved with your menstrual consciousness, um, how have you
Mm.
applied it with your mothering as your daughter's grown up and as you've deepened into this relationship with this man? How have you,
Mm.
how do you like kind of restructure your mothering and your relating with him around, your menstrual consciousness? How do you think it informs and kind of steers your maternal behavior and your, well,
Yeah, I mean, you know, so I'm postmenopausal now. So I had my last bleed. Where are we now? Probably like, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago, something like that. Um, so the menstrual stuff is now postmenopausal. I suppose for my daughter, my daughter is like the most beautiful soul. She's like, she calls out shit when she needs to, but the rest of the time she's just like the softest, gentlest, most beautiful thing. It's just holding that space for her to be who she needs to be, however that is. That's like the most important thing. Um, it's really difficult to kind of say how it's informed because it is just part of who I am. I can't kind of like divorce that and go, well, I only do that kind of like in this scenario. It's just kind of who I am. But I think you know, allowing her to have her own menstrual journey, like if she's, even though I'm not an advocate of taking the pill, if that's what she feels she needs to do, then that is okay. If she's not needing to do that, that's equally okay. Supporting her when she's had issues, when she's had pap smears that have come back with HPV and sin 1 and sin 2, and just being that kind of sounding board for her, like when she goes into an anxiety state around that, and just kind of like holding that space for her to be able to say what she needs to say, to ask the questions, to lead her in certain directions and make suggestions. And I mean, she had like energy field healing back from when she was like, from when she was 7. So she's kind of been, she's like steeped in all of the work that I've ever done. She's kind of like, she just soaks it up like a sponge, receives and receives it all. But also knowing that she will do that for her kids when she's ready. She's not going to be like jumping off down the doctors with her kids for this, that, and the other. Like, what else can we use? What other alternatives are there? And, understanding how energy works and, calming the energy field down and clearing the energy field down and being aware of the space where you're living and being connected. It's just all part of it, being connected to your womb space and understanding, the bigger picture. She's not at that kind of space with her womb currently, but that's okay. You know, her journey with her womb is hers, you know. So I can't, it's not my place to tell her what she needs to do. She will find that in her own time. But just that kind of process, if we are in a menstrual cycle, and obviously postmenopausal, my energy still fluctuates. So just understanding and letting everybody know, this isn't a good time to ask me that. Come and ask me that at this part in my cycle. I need space at this point. I don't want to talk. I just want to be on my own. It's nothing anybody has done. It's not me being moody. It's just I am not, and I've never been prepared to be like the classical idea of what a mother is, which is in full flow around ovulation, where she's just kind of spinning all these plates. And because of the high estrogen level, we're kind of like very unselfish. So we're like, yeah, 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 giving out and, supporting everybody else. But that can't last. If you take that energy into, when we're kind of moving into autumn, cracks start to appear because the hormonal balance has shifted. And progesterone says, fuck off. No, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. But if we're trying to carry on doing it, things fracture really badly. I've worked with many women over the years that have literally, are kind of like their anger and frustration levels at that point because they're still trying to spin all those plates and not giving themselves a moment to take themselves off, even if that's kind of like a bath on their own without the kids all piling into the bath. Like, ask your husband or get to the point where your husband just knows she needs some space. Let her have a bath on her own. Yeah, she might be in there for an hour. It's okay. We've got it. Those kind of things make a massive difference. I used to get my fertility clients to literally have, I'd suggest they put something on their calendars in the kitchen, like, which would show like when they're bleeding, and so when they kind of want to be on their own, kind of when they're ovulating. This is for their partners as well, and just kind of like, so you kind of understand where she is emotionally, and so everybody knows, and everybody knows it's okay for her to be on her own. And that's equally important for the boys to know,
There's
because then they can be respectful
some
and
research that they
understand.
did.
You know, you see it in action. You see it kind of as a living example of a woman who understands her own rhythm and understands when she needs to kind of withdraw, and that's okay. She will come out. She's not kind of gone forever. Hey presto, in a couple of days, she's back. She's back. She might kind of circle in and out and in and out a little bit. That springtime when you kind of go out a little bit too early. And you're like, yeah, I'm fine. And like, oh, no, not quite ready. And that kind of like in and out. But just seeing that in action and talking to your kids about that, you know. And if you are in pain, sharing that with them. Why would you not share that? Why would you kind of like keep that from them? Like, how can they be grow into rounding adults when you don't share that big part of yourself with them? It's just, that's how we learn and grow, isn't it? It's okay. She will come back.
Mm,
We've not lost her forever.
mm,
Just imagining ourselves in those red tents and lying on straw and just sharing tales and plaiting each other's hair.
mm.
And
Yeah. As a single mama, I'm often, in mum mode. But I do try my best
yeah.
to rest as much as I can. There's often times where I can't, and my womb will
Mm.
ache because she's saying, "Stop, stop, we need to rest, stop." Um, but I do educate him, and
Yeah.
he's around me, and I do my
Can I
moon
just say, can I
cup, and he
just,
knows, like, when mummy's got the moon time, she can't do wrestling. She's got to do resting.
mm,
And he'll even, do sweet little things like give me a massage, and he'll say like, "Oh, we don't have to do wrestling because you've got the moon time, mummy." And he's only 5, and I'm really proud to be bringing him up like this. And when I reclaimed my moon from pharmaceuticals, I started bleeding regularly, and to celebrate the first one that came after I removed a progesterone implant, I painted a rose and I put it on Facebook with this bit of blurb about my journey, and my mum sent me a private message asking me to take it down. So I'm literally a chain breaker, like none of my family are mentally
mm,
conscious, none of them. But
yeah,
my son is massively mentally conscious. And there's some papers
yes,
that are speaking to this. The woman who came up with this term, menstrual consciousness, Mataya, she's wrote a lot about how it changes a woman's relationship with herself when she becomes menstrually conscious. And me and you obviously know the truth of
hmm
that. But we start to use it as like a compass. And then in my second year of my master's, I interviewed mothers on the relationship with the first postnatal bleed that came after they'd had the children. And you notice that
hmm
the more menstrually conscious the women were, the more they ritualized that first bleed, and it actually became something that was very healing for them. So it became a healing tool, and they spoke to waiting for it to come back and not having it in pregnancy, not having this compass to map themselves and their rhythm, like you were just speaking to. So it does become this embodied
yeah,
phenomena. And I think you said earlier that you can't separate what is you in wisdom and what's just your life because it is you. Like it's literally the crucible of which women live
mm,
and divine. And it's amazing to see it being awakened again in our cultural epoch and us being the chain breaking generation. And the other thing was they did some
mm,
other research on men and how men develop menstrual consciousness. Because as you've just spoke to, the more menstrually consciousness the partner is, I mean, we're speaking to heterosexual relationships here, but even within same-sex relationships with women or, you know,
mm,
um, all these different gender expressions that there are now, understanding this womb as a
yeah,
map to support that transitioning through those different hormonal phases of the month. It's just really important that everybody understands it to bring in this balance now in our collective. So
yeah,
this research on the men, it showed that
mm,
some boys learn it from the sisters in the house and they learn it from the mothers, but most young children learn it in school and in adolescence. And so it's peer to peer, and the girls kind of get at the guys and the guys get at the girls because it's this thing that they don't really understand and they're not being mentored and held in it to really see how we should hold it. And so
mm,
sometimes the girls, because they
mm,
get sick of being jibed at for being taken the mickey out of, they started to take the mickey out of the boys. So one boy who'd been interviewed said the girls had stuck a sanitary towel on his desk and it made him embarrassed. So there was this almost like a war going on between the youth of our generation, because they're not understanding, not being held in it. But then when the men
Hmm.
got older, if men had been with a menstrually conscious woman, she'd then initiate him into this cyclical mapping, what you're speaking of, so that he couldn't understand. And then he knew that when she was premenstrual, if she was argumentative, he shouldn't take it personally and attack. He should hold the space and
Get chocolate.
yeah. And he
Get dark
also knew
chocolate.
that when she was going to be in
Get dark
ovulation, that was going to
chocolate.
be a time where he could receive more from her and that she'd be more available to him. And so it helped them to have a more harmonious relationship. And the men that didn't become menstrually consciousness, like
Hmm.
one guy who was interviewed in this particular research, he said, when she's got her period, it's blowjob week. So this became sexism, and like not even having to be empathetic to what she's going through and what she's processing when she's bleeding, but actually she'd just be a sex servant to him because that's the way it would be. So this literature was really eye-opening for
Mm.
me, and it's made me realize that that's fundamentally
Mm.
important. And what also I align with you on, like when you said you had this 7-year break, I'm just on the cusp of finishing my 7-year break, and it's on the point when Rahu, which is this Vedic astronomical archetype, like this snake that's severed in half. So it's this head that's got no body that can't be satiated, and it's this body that's got no head that's got no sense. So when this is in your house of relationships, it can kind of funky things up a bit. And that's maturing for me in June. So I've been working
Mhm.
to call in this relationship, right? And something's starting to change, something's happening where things are starting to step forward. Like what you said, all of a sudden I was really attractive. And like this year's just my sun year and all these miracles are popping off. I've done my concert, I'm doing my PhD, I've done loads of deep work on self-worth. And I think that womb thing as well was massive for me as well. So I'm really in this state, like I feel like a blooming
Mm.
rose, like I feel so sexy and powerful, and I want to keep, being the sovereign queen, the sovereign queen. So I'm wanting to go in with it now, and I've never had an opportunity to do it before because 7 years ago was the last time I was getting in a relationship, and I just weren't there. I didn't know, I didn't have it. So I'm so excited to practice
Mm.
it and bring it in. And like I feel like the egg, the corona radiata. This is a radiant crown that glows around the egg when she's ready to be fertilized. And we've been sold this story that she's just passive. She waits for the fastest, strongest sperm to come and make her alive. It's like not true.
Oh, I
She
think she's
lulls
very
them. She's
she's
this
very
like goddess.
discerning.
It's
She's
the
very
giant, it's the
discerning.
biggest cell in the body, and the sperms are the smallest cell in the body. So she does this shamanic ceremony when she's ready, and she puts out this pheromonal stuff and whips them into a frenzy. And they do this like shamanic ritual and massage her, and then she has to feel the right resonance. So she's incredibly discerning, and she will choose the right resonance and only that one, and then that's it, it's done. So she's
Hmm.
incredibly active, incredibly discerning,
Yeah.
and fully in her power. And so I'm wanting to
Mm.
embody it like this primordial
And
femininity.
very
Yeah,
conscious,
as
I
I
would
go into
say.
this choosing now
Yeah,
of
very
this right
conscious.
masculine that wants to step in and,
Mm.
build and evolve together. Just, I'm
Mm.
loving it. I'm loving it. So, really encouraging all the listeners to develop menstrual consciousness, regardless of your gender, regardless of your gender, and
Mm.
even more so if you're one of
Yeah.
these newer identity expressions that's coming out now, because we understand, don't we? Like this process of becoming male or female once you've been fertilized, it's got again so many layers to it, and there's parts of the psychology that might still express as female but the body expresses as male. So there's so much in the dynamic that's influencing all this now. So it's not that it's wrong, it's part of our evolution. And like I really encourage people to look at this menstrual consciousness and the womb wisdom in the right way for them, not try to apply it through these, polarized gender, um, um, you know, s- uh,
Hmm.
these polarized gendered views, you know what I mean, like biological polarized gender. But I invite, us to
Hmm.
see where it goes and the new shape
Yeah.
it takes, because I think it is just so, it's just so fundamental for all of us. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to go back to that point about what you were saying in terms of, because it feels like quite an important piece. You know, when you were saying about, being a single mother and kind of and doing all of this stuff and, not necessarily resting or whatever it is when you need to. What I would say is, like, say for example, you're like day one of your bleed and you're at work and just having that conversation with your womb space and saying, I know, I know you want to rest. I know you want to be on your own. I know you need to be fed. Can't physically do that at this moment. I have to be here. But as soon as I get home, that's exactly what we're going to do. Because then you're acknowledging your body, you're acknowledging the call of your body in your womb space. You're not just kind of ignoring it. You're actually kind of acknowledging what you're sensing and feeling and letting it know. It's kind of like, I can't actually physically do that now. It's almost kind of like, let's reposition it along the timeline. Like as soon as I get home,
Mm.
that's what we're going
It's
to
like
do.
give permission for a
It's okay.
takeaway, isn't it?
It might
Or
not be
like
ideal.
get a batch cook out of the freezer, just
Exactly.
like
It's
smash the
it's
cartoons with the kids. Don't do a bath and bedtime routine. Just stick him in bed with a story, like that kind of thing, isn't it? Finding 10 minutes, sitting and having a really long brew. Like for me, this particular bleed, I was getting
yeah.
I was,
It really is, yeah, just that kind of like just acknowledging what your body is asking for
mm,
makes a massive difference. It might sound like really simple, and it is really simple,
mm,
but it makes a massive difference because you're not shutting things off. You're kind of acknowledging, I know that's how you're feeling, but
mm,
at this moment, I can't do that. But I've cleared the diary and I'm not going to go out after work. I'm not going to go out after work and have a drink or meet my mates or whatever. I'm just going to go straight home, take myself, and look after myself to the best of my ability, given
mm,
where my life is at this particular time, which may or may not be ideal. But that kind of doesn't really matter. It's just the acknowledgement of, even if you can just carve yourself 10 minutes, then at least your womb knows that you've made a conscious choice and decision to do that rather than shutting it down or ignoring it. It's massive.
mm. Yeah, I was up on the land. We're putting the yurt up on the land. And I had to drive to get the yurt base, and no one had come and helped me. And I did put on Facebook because my womb was saying in the morning, I don't want to do that on my own. Please don't make us do all that. And I had to say, I'm so sorry. And I did put out a call and asked for some people to help, but no one, it was too short notice. And we had to do it, and it was so hot. But yeah, I did give her a rest. And I did change a plan that night. And as you were speaking then, it's kind of like, I've got a small child and often he'll want some presents and I have to just say to him, acknowledge his feelings and say, I'm really sorry, but and it's just like that, isn't it? The honoring. And sometimes I'm around him and I'm not acknowledging it. I know, but I'm feeling a bit guilty and I'm ignoring it. And it's a different dynamic and that makes him look a bit worse. So it is a bit like that, like, okay, I'm sorry, that can't happen right now. I acknowledge it's hard, but I promise we'll make it up. Like that, having that nurturing. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that advice.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Mm.
Mm.
My pleasure.
So I feel like I've had such a beautiful conversation and I haven't got any more questions or reflections. But is there anything you'd like to finish with?
I think, you know, just acknowledging where we are and knowing that's okay, and doing the best that we can do in that moment. Just, doing our best, whatever that looks like. It might look like a tiny little thing, it might be a big thing. It doesn't really matter. It's just the point that we're doing it and we're consciously doing it. And we're consciously choosing to do it. And yeah, I truly believe that the more present we can be for our body, and the more that we kind of develop that capacity to understand what a full body yes is or a full body no is, where we kind of like suspend that kind of what is happening in the head space and allowing the head to kind of have full maniacal reign over everything. Just suspending that, even if it's just like for a nanosecond, and just kind of being present within the body, and let the body and all the womb just kind of be the navigator for a moment. And then the more that we do that, just it's incremental, the more we do that, the more we listen to that, the stronger those impulses become. And we listen to them a bit more, because actually the result of listening to them is actually has worked really well. It's kind of like it's had a good result. So kind of, why wouldn't we do that? So we do it again, and we do it again, and maybe we do it with something else, and then we start to kind of feel confident that actually the choices of the body are maybe the best choices that we can make. I was doing this piece with a guy called David Manning, and he was talking about how there's been so much issue around the throat chakra, and things like implants and devices, and dating back, lifetime and after lifetime, and just distortion around this throat chakra and being able to communicate and receive and be heard. And how, because of all those those distortions, how that's kind of allowed the headspace to be kind of acting on its own and not being connected into the heart space. So it's kind of like that ego, that the ego self being kind of like full blown and just kind of, just being the total driving force. But actually, the more we kind of clear the throat center, the more we can kind of like connect the brain and the mind with the heart space, so that again we're just working from a more embodied place, which is more balanced. The big piece is at the moment, isn't it, is really working with the heart space, and opening that heart space. The heart is the bridge between spirit and matter. So it's like a really big piece in our evolutionary journey. But yeah, I just love the way he described this kind of like, just kind of bringing the head and the mind into kind of like the body, rather than just kind of like acting out on its own, like almost as though it's like completely disconnected. And so it can actually kind of listen to the body and listen to the heart, and maybe in that listening, just kind of like moderate how it actions things, and how we feel about something, and how we do something. That just feels like a really important piece at the moment.
Mm,
So yeah.
thank you so much for your words of wisdom, Mama. Oh, yeah, I love your work so much. Please do a training. And are you going to come and speak at the symposium in July? Yes. Yes.
Yes, I mean, you have
So
asked me, and I would love to do that. So now it's like in the public domain, I've said yes,
amazing.
so then I have to do
So if
that.
you would
So
like
thank
to
you for
hear more
asking.
of Andrea, if you're getting this before July 2025, Andrea is going to be bringing a really important talk about our culture and about the importance of this to the symposium in July. And then you can also get in touch with Andrea through her website, root.medicine.com.co.uk. So root
.co.uk.
medicine root.co.uk, and you have a lovely Instagram,
Hmm.
don't you, that you have some beautiful things on.
Yeah, so that is at root.medicine. But you can get all those links from my website. So, yeah, that would be
Oh.
lovely to see some
So
people
I
there.
just want to say, I just really want to honor your journey and the wisdom that you bring in and the role that you're playing at this time. You're really celebrating the strength and the courage and the commitment that you've woven through your life. And yeah, just really see you. Um, I really see you, Andrea. I feel like you're such an incredible role model. I really do believe that. I feel it purely. You're such an incredible role model, and yeah, I'm just really grateful for this opportunity and for crossing your path, and finally for the depth of the healing that I got when you facilitated that space. It's meant so much for me. It's been so transformative, and it's led to new doors opening and greater service, greater depth in my service. So I'm very, very grateful for that and for you giving me this time this morning. And I can't wait to see you at the symposium and to work with you again in the future, because I definitely will be. Definitely will be.
Mm, beautiful. Thank you. It's been really lovely talking to you. And yeah, I'm just, yeah, I'm a bit blown away. It's really, yeah, I feel like I am now in the space where I'm meant to be. So that is really
Oh,
good. Thank you.
we're all
Been
so,
an
so
absolute
glad
pleasure.
you're in that place now, Mama. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And I'll speak to you soon. And to the listeners out there, you felt it, I know you have. Get in touch with this incredible woman if you want to receive some of her root medicine. Oh, and get in touch with me if you have a theme, if you want to come on and tell your story. Yeah, so much love. So, so, so much love. I've been Rainbow, and this has been Andrea, and we've been Rawful But True. Could you?